For as long as I could remember, I've been a fan of professional wrestling. When I was young, my dad would wake me up 1 or 2 in the morning to watch late night reruns of wrestling programming. See, my dad fixed video games for a living in the arcade. So he would be traveling to bars to fix games that they had or whatnot. He would get home about 1 or 2 in the morning. Now, the earliest I remember is probably 94. I was probably 3 years old. My dad waking me up in the living room at the very first apartment we ever had. This was before we moved into the house that we would live in for 20 plus years in this kind of, I don't want to say it was run down, but it was, at the time, it was a pretty nice place. It was kind of a duplex, apartment complex type thing. And downstairs, my dad would bring me from upstairs, take me downstairs, and we would go watch TV. Now, at the time, I think it was a lot of WCW. See, my dad grew up watching AWA. Well, of course he did. He was from Minnesota. Vern Gagne, Greg Gagne, Samoans, so many people that wrestled for the AWA, the Flayers, Regal back in the day. My dad loved it. Most of my family on his side loved wrestling at the time. And he got me into it. And I don't ever remember what it was about wrestling that I fell in love with. I don't remember if it was the athletes, the bigger-than-life superstars, or what it was. But there was something in it that I absolutely got entranced by. Now, like most fans, whether you're a hardcore fan from birth or whether you picked it up along the way, there's something that drew you in. Now, it was a little different for me because while I did watch wrestling quite a bit, up until a certain point, I never ever watched pay-per-views. It probably wasn't about until 2009, other than renting the DVDs or the VHS tapes from the video store, I never was allowed to order the wrestling pay-per-views. I would watch, when I got older, I would watch Raw and SmackDown. I would watch Nitro here and there. Thunder. I liked Thunder as a kid. I don't know why. I remember SmackDowns on Thursdays on UPN. My mom would be working. Because when I was growing up, my mom was the general manager of McDonald's. Well, 3 to be exact. And when I was a kid, she would work till about 6 p.m. And at the time, this is right when WWE or WWF at the time would come on. And when it used to come on, I remember sitting in the living room. My mom never wanted me to watch it. My dad loved it. My mom not so much. She thought it was too violent for me as a kid. She never ever wanted me to watch it. But I did. Sitting in the living room while she was making dinner, preparing something. I remember in the living room just sitting out there for hours and hours. Or if she needed me, we had a TV set up in our kitchen. It was one of those ones that went under the cabinets and kind of pulled down, or else we had a countertop one. And I remember watching Guts and all the Disney shows, or not Disney shows, but Legends of the Hidden Temple, etc. Or switching over to SmackDown. I couldn't tell you what happened on most of the pay-per-views as a kid, because like I said, I didn't get to watch them. The closest I had was Premiere Video, or going to the video store and getting those VHS tapes. And I remember them, because they weren't cheap. At the time, I think it was like $3 or $4 to rent that VHS tape, and I couldn't do it without a parent. Until ultimately, finally, one day, my mom made that decision to tell that store employee, all right, he can rent anything up until NC-17 or even like the pornos. He could rent PG, PG-13, or R-rated, or the coveted TV-14, because that was back when WWE was TV-14. Now, do I miss that era? Do I miss seeing chair shots, blood, people beating the absolute hell out of each other? Yes. Those were the days. The Rock. The Rock was a character that transformed and brought me into the business. I already liked wrestling, but when The Rock came around, something was different. Now, I've already said I didn't get to watch pay-per-views, so I didn't get to see Rocky Maivia debut at SummerSlam. I know what you're saying. Tubby, it wasn't SummerSlam. I know it was Survivor Series. Do you remember that? Do you remember those memories from when you were a kid? Maybe you weren't born by 97. Maybe you weren't around then. I was. As a kid born in 91, I remember them wrestling at Mall of America. I'm from Wisconsin. I didn't get to go, but how big was that event? In the rotunda right at Mall of America, Lex Luger. Don't even get me started. I wanted to go to that, and I wanted to go to that bad, but it wasn't an option. I didn't ever really get to spend too much money on wrestling. Like I said, I was pretty much limited to the TV product. For as long as I can remember, I remember wrestling out at school in elementary. We would set up in the winter, we would set up a ring. You basically hit a big square. You would draw lines in the snow, and you had to stay within the boundaries if you wanted to do some moves. Not the dangerous ones, not the really hardcore ones. Simple ones to try to draw in a crowd of kids at the playground to see if they would draw interest. I remember doing the frog splash. I remember doing the rock bottom. And it was actually one of those wrestling moves that caused me to fall off of a bed, hit my pinky on my mom's dresser, and break it. That's the only broken bone I've ever had. Now, kids, don't try this at home, right? That's the motto. That's what they tell you. Don't try this at home. But how couldn't I? I was a kid. I was impressionable. I loved what I saw. It was reckless, it was dangerous, and it was exciting. A big complaint of today's programming is, well, the attitude's gone. The swearing's gone. The product has changed. If I had knew back then what I know now, that superstars take these bumps, that the bumps, the injuries will all catch up to them later on in life. They'll have problems. CTE is a huge thing. Guys can't move. Guys are on disability. So many injuries or so many issues related to their wrestling career. I may not have cheered as hard back then. Who am I kidding? It was a kid. I would have cheered regardless. But see, that's the thing. Wrestling has evolved. When I was a kid, you wouldn't see those super high-flying action unless it was on the WCW cruiserweights. Whether it was on seeing guys early in their career like Rey Mysterio, Jushin Thunder Liger. Oh, man. Seeing Mick Foley jump off of that apron for the first time, doing that elbow drop. Let me tell you. I didn't get to see Mick Foley versus The Undertaker on the Hell in a Cell. I watched it on the DVD, I think, 7 months later. Or a VHS tape 7 months later. I had heard about it. My friends talked about it. There wasn't any YouTube. There wasn't any clips to go watch. I didn't read the Dave Meltzer wrestling newsletter. I just enjoyed wrestling. I knew it probably was fake. I knew it was probably scripted, but I didn't care. It was entertainment. I didn't dive in or look at every little thing that happened. I just sat back and watched. If I didn't enjoy somebody, I would boo. If I loved somebody, I would cheer. I didn't think about them getting buried. I didn't think about them getting the pushes. I just watched the product. That's all I did. It wasn't about until 2003 or 2004 that I kind of took a break from WWE. Because wrestling was always a big part of my life, but I went through fads. When I went into high school in about 2005, I kind of lost interest from wrestling a little bit. I don't know why. I just started focusing on other things. One of the big things I started doing was YouTube in 2006, I've been doing YouTube since 2006. I've had about 15 different channels. Maybe you didn't know that. Maybe I'll tell that life story one day. But I remember going away from WWE and I was getting into mobster games and everything. And ultimately, as much as I wanted to get away from it, as much as I've had fads going from wrestling when I was young to about the 2000s, really getting into sports and watching ESPN every day. But ultimately, I came back to wrestling. And I can't explain why. I don't know what kept drawing me in. Like I said, in high school, I didn't really watch much. I missed it from 2007 to 2009. I'd ultimately go back and watch all those pay-per-views and get myself caught up so I wasn't behind. But when I started doing wrestling for a living in 2010, covering it, when I first got that Machinima Sports contract, wrestling again became my life. I dedicated the past 6 years, 3,500 plus videos, to that love for professional wrestling. Whether it was hate, whether it was complaining, whether it was bitching, whether it was moaning, whether it was putting somebody over, wrestling was the thing that brought me and my audience together. Now, I don't know what brought you into wrestling. I don't know what your story is. I don't know how you got to where you were. I don't know how you fell in love with the sport. But for me, it was a connection. Me and my dad sitting in that living room when I was a kid and watching something that still to this day, I believe my dad is it's real to me, damn it guy. Because to him it was. He'll still ask me questions about feuds. Oh, does he really hate him? What's the inside scoop on that? He still believes it's real. Maybe not real. He knows it's fake. But he doesn't care. Because ultimately, once a wrestling fan, always a wrestling fan. If the WWE isn't for you, that's the good thing about it. There's so many other avenues to watch. There's no point in being miserable, being upset, hating on one company. Because that's what I've realized after all this time on YouTube. In the past month, I've changed my whole stance. I've gone to more discussion-based, logical thinking. Last month on the pay-per-view, I pretty much predicted everything right without even kind of paying attention. And I don't care if I'm right or wrong. I just want to be entertained. And as of late, I have been. And it's been drawing me in. So with the upcoming brand split, I'm going to be there for that. I'm going to be there for SummerSlam, Survivor Series, TLC, WrestleMania next year. Probably not in person, but I'm going to be there watching. Because wrestling has had that connection. And while my channel may grow and I may have other interests, I don't think I can ever get away from wrestling. I don't think I can ever get away from those moments that made me into who I am today. Well, wrestling isn't everything to me anymore. I do enjoy doing other stuff, and I do enjoy spending other time. At the end of the day, wrestling is wrestling. And I just love it. What about you?